Oh, real time questions. So good morning and welcome to the TMA leadership. Welcome to Starkey Ranch TLC Theater Library Cultural Center. It's not my favorite. I just, do we take roll? I have it on here, but do we take roll calls? All right, Commissioner Long here. Commissioner David Egbert. Councilmember Julie Scopes. Yes. Council Commissioner Pat Kemp. And Councilmember Lynn Woodson. Yeah. Councilman Joseph Citron. Here. Commissioner Gary Bradford. I'm not joining us today. Yeah. And Commissioner Seth Whitman. Here. And we have Commissioner Mariano here. Okay. Thank you, Chair. We have some alternates that are here. I thought Councilmember Murphy was going to be here this morning. I'm sure he'll probably be coming in soon. And Greg Slater. Okay. Am I missing anybody? Brad from TFTA. Yes, and then we have Secretary Bloom and then David Green from Giovanna. Okay, and Seth, is this your first people meeting? It is. Please meet our newest commissioners, Commissioner Seth Whitman. Okay, we do have some public comment. This meeting has been broadcast and website has been recorded. All right, so we ask that each speaker introduce themselves by stating their name and address. We will offer 3 minutes to each speaker. Once the speaker has stated their name and address, a 3-minute timer will start. We're going to start with Melanie Fowler. Hi, good morning. I'm Calvin after 47 months after Saturday. And then we both care of the patient with a partnership. More resolution business and nonprofits that address the most pressing issues when things need to be residents of the guys. I'm here to support it sooner than the idea of the regional vehicles being most relevant, mass, and past companies. Takeaways are doing fast forward, region, and moving in that operation amongst very sincere communities as measured in the this is where we do about a partnership, collaboration with community foundations, and United States. We're in the region today, and we're consumers. Unfortunately, it's the same county-based transportation facility structure was designed in 1970, but with it years ago. 10 years of infrastructure is now at least with its own, and the transportation moving into the library. The commission of fund is confidential, and it's still very information. First, members are advice on the districts. Now that we're in one county, but if you opportunity to increase collaboration. The regional transportation tax revenue did not pass. 45% of the revenues. There's way to so that you could and the gap is going to have the message to our solutions. The worker reaching to evidence to do it efficiency and play control about the program. But I have an opportunity to there's a student state staff. Most importantly, we need to consider creating an advanced players. population representatives those in the important. So it's some of the workers in TMA, New York, some of the ones be fed, but the very good of the same opportunities. What are mechanism of the discussion? And what is some of the frustrating, it's expensive. Transportation accounts for another 60% of transportation area minimize limits job opportunities to residents and the support of different areas that are employers to masses. It's painful to be regular groups by exploring the original field. If it really happened, I think we have the performance of our population in the state from certain residents. Given our sheer size, the regional Midwest will have movement simply by virtue of the impact of the most rural residents. This includes a lot of taking funding to make nutrition projects. The economic analysis by activity states that for every dollar invested in forest transportation, it's $5 to improve the state economy. Dollars of fiber, we want some kind of transformation impact for the Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We have some other people who have signed up to speak this morning. I have Dave Coleman. Want to say anything? Coleman?
Mr. President, I'm sure that I'm saying that we call it something different. After the today, years ago, I started saying that we discussed about 40 minutes. The goal was to do this stuff, this stuff, you look at the roads and clear the buildings and we have but there's very student, it's a job education. Community stress of the same. But we stand on 10 this month in the black community and it says earlier that maybe 40% of this living in the city, the mindset of difficulty with transportation issues. So transportation and housing, doing completely different use. So you have US I think that absolutely remain separate. Just this past Sunday, I attended the bench at the age of victims of gun violence. There were so many service individuals in Canada that I didn't have a farm ready come back in the time. I started to get my pilot in there, which I know that Gary would be out. I couldn't say it was I mean, the highways, 270 bed in Hillsborough, and it's 7,300 7,300 we don't want to know the facts and the information along with that. I see what's happening. I'm telling you, I go up and do the ones that you're not still going to do that. Yeah, what's the one that I'm the one. Well, people see the council and that directly with the computer and it's a name. My commission stuff. And I didn't understand about that, not dealing with it. But the city, which is part of the bill, it's a very powerful ability because it's very easy for me. And you remember that my total in the US, 5% of you get my gas and that's really the start tension, but yeah, and we were going to transportation. We came together on a time of discuss. Yes, it's the transportation of the and we'll take in part of Mexico. I do stuff here in the hospital and call that site on Mexico to get a kind of transportation aspects. I do to help us what's the road. We're going to do that back and
For the second, thank you. Next we have Jen Kerouac. Good morning. I'm Jen Kerouac. I'm from Good morning. shady birds. And so I see them coming around and I think that, I had, Tampa Bay residents, the house share, the concerns that are in the eastern. I'm from the island. And there's other than recently doing a study for Jaden Road. And in conjunction with you, I'm sure you guys are, 460 accidents that will have occurred. And many of the accidents as I said that there's a lot that's Florida and Pasco. I would appreciate the things and aspects that I see living in our lives. That, everybody just tries to hide out. Many of the accidents are as a result of shaking those very vascular. I said that one gentleman for sure was paralyzed and sent out of the hospital because it was and these are the facts. Okay, these are all different situations, but when I'm talking to them, regardless whether it's Tampa Bay in general, Pasco County, Minnesota County, Morris County, as someone myself, significantly impacted by the traffic issues of Tampa Bay. I believe that each of you as servants to your communities such as my father and Mr. who speaking that. It was a significant moment because along with traffic comes insurance subs, right? And I'm not telling you their nonsense as someone who lives here in Illinois. That sees the traffic down here, the situation. Someone who drove an hour and a half, where that's significantly so for the time, should be more about it than the every day, and not one time driving 72 miles each way. Not one time in over a year did I experience one accident, not once. So I do encourage you to look to the communities within this country. Look to the communities that are successfully serving their constituents in a way that you collaborate with one another. Because this is what I know to be true. And I'm very passionate about this. And ask Mr. Mariano, this won't be the last time y'all see me. I'm passionate about the constituents of your counties, of your cities, whomever it is that you serve them well. Thank you. All right. Yeah, thank you.
I think this opportunity to remind everyone, the microphones at your space centers are live.
Okay. Next we have Dennis Cuban. So this is apparently we're hearing what people are saying here, but the audience and the people that are watching the live will not hear what people are saying for whatever reason. I know that there was an
Just fix it.
Fix it up. Thank you. I just think I should bring that to attention.
Morning, my name is Dennis Eagle. I live at 1805 Austin Drive in City. I'm here on behalf of our community. Started our civic association last night. Had one with both, and my concerns are the same as Ben mentioned. And I'm afraid that I'm not against the growth, but what we're afraid of is that these boards, they're looking at the big picture, which is fine, but they're overlooking small towns that are being impacted both with our street, all the stuff and everything that are going in all around the little towns. If they're getting integrated with the traffic as from using them as shortcuts to get from, to the road, which we all do. We're not against that. What we're looking for is to look at the Middletown also, and maybe do some more traffic studies and figure in what the impact of the subdivisions and industrials and everything else that's coming in. Like you said, I brought a report, we got a report just for our Middletown Road, had almost 500 reports, 1 year. That's, if you think like that, we don't have sidewalk, we don't have nothing out there, so it's just not safe for the road. We would ask you that you look at smaller towns also.
Similar to the sheriff.
And is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to us? All right, we have some other comments that I was going to put to the record.
Well, actually, 2 comments the other case before we moved to the through email as well. I think the opportunity to show the community. So first comment, we have here, it's from Michelle Dixon. And she was writing to comment on the agenda item for the merger with Hillsborough, and some passing the appeals into the merger entity, and just saying her opposition to this. Team Barton was not funded, and for the city is included as some financial sustained session move. Also, this potential entity was substantial. I ran the mail with my adjusted points out, where it's the literacy of info to rely on for guidance regarding de-resident NPO. The NPO was established in federal mandated in the rate of absolute permanent in construction of local communities by the state highway construction that employ such impactful boundary projects to build the local citizens to petition the elected officials and local boards is intrinsic and best practice and local focused communities. As a Hillsborough and the resident, I want to see the issues we are focusing and addressed on our local appeal purpose to reflect our unique role. Just because someone seem to feel that that's the road to where it was. And for us, it does not mean that it's a time period, but it's a taxpayer. Excuse me. We're in the wake of challenges we face to pass local referendum and dedicated sources of due to some Hillsborough subsidizing individuals and quality projects of other communities. In opposed to this merger and approach, Hillsborough County Government standing elected to represent. Thank you, Michelle Coulson, and Florida.
Are you really the ones that were not given to us?
Correct.
You're not going to read this whole
I will not read those.
state.
The next one is kind of Mr. Bob McCray. Although I wish to submit a base public comment, but email continue that should be meeting 3.423. I urge members of the subcommittee to reject the premise of an NPO TMA merger by challenging the of understanding on the agenda. Similar comments in italics. He references a paragraph on the first page of the where since 1911, has desired that through appeals very consolidated, and he goes on to quote the document. To any official policy statements or guidelines be produced to validate this, regardless of what governor's desire, the fact that the TPA NPOs have remained separate for at least 33 years is proof that the sufficient justifications have been made. What is so different now? The work remains in balancing the act relative to other Tampa counties, given to the central position as the urban economic hub of the region, inundation from exurban communities from Pastor and Polk. And we need to preserve the counties in natural need east and south county. Hillsborough must ensure that it has the latitude to make planning decisions based on some particular conditions, take the continuous history of urban construction as a lesson. Good intention, regional has been damaging urban areas in the past. Bring back to the podium, the understanding, as the central for chairs, was established in state statutes and as transportation planning alliance, and has a local release and system appeals to the broader West Central Florida region, just that whole watch. If the SCTPA was more effective, the limitations on the SCTPA that prevent it from establishing regional coordination was sufficient to believe that merger was necessary. In the process of amending this to Los Angeles and multi-island merger. Quoting from the MOU, whereas the pending sunset of the Clinton Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, the Regional Transportation Planning Project Development. Sorry, a second. We can be outside right now.
I'm in that.
I'm in page 420.
No, we're not. Okay, these will all be emailed out to everybody. Sorry. Yeah. Feel all right with that?
If you feel like if I ask, could we at least hear which ones are, which ones are, I mean, again, you can do it, you can summarize that.
Well, you go for those, why don't I go through these and I can do that for you?
Anyway, before we even have a discussion, I don't think it's to be any votes personally. It's where we have somewhat uninformed what the landscape. Let's just have these build out to us and we can.
Send out to the
as the representatives of the three counties to have a discussion about the possibility. And we can discuss the pros, but there are many cons. And what I really take exception to in some of the documents that you've been talking about is how much misinformation is in there. It is not accurate, not based on any fact, and gives a whole bunch of reasons why it's not a good idea. And there's nothing in the opposition emails that talks about any of the positives that we achieved. So we're policymakers, are sent here by our citizens, primarily those of us that are elected, and I think we have a duty to explore why there are other areas of the country that have been so successful in implementing a really effective public transportation system that, as we all know, starts with a spine. And there's one single thing that stands out if you look at all of them. They all represent a fairly large region with many counties, and they all have one regional MPO. There's a reason for that, and I think we have an obligation to discuss what that is.
Yeah, and we're going to discuss that later on today. So we'll make sure that everyone whose emails to me gets distributed, and I'm going to keep moving on. That's okay with everybody. We have the first item is the meeting summary approved. And I have a comment, but I'll feel free to see if anyone else has any comments about so I noticed in the minutes from the December meeting that it says we needed to vote for some advice. And I don't see that on my action items.
Sure. Still doing it, and so I'm not sure that who are representatives. I'm not even to the team motion. So do you know until it's
Because in the minutes it says we're going to hold that vote today. So, all right. Any other comments?
I move that we approve the minutes with the notation from Commissioner Starkey about why we're not taking up the vice chair position.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Now we're going to have a presentation by Diana Elfner on the FDOT rail system plan and the NPOOC Freight Rail Committee.
Issues.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen? All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Diana Elsner. I'm presenting today on behalf of Holly Cohen. I work in the FDOT central office on the freight and rail team. And today I'm going to fill you in on our rail system plan update. I think we'll cover the content first, and then my colleague Stefano and I will try to address any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. So what is the rail system plan? It articulates passenger and freight rail vision for the state, specifies the rail service and investment program, which is a long-term investment strategy. It identifies rail improvements and needs, and it's required to be developed and updated by Florida statute. Our last plan was written in 2015 and amended and updated in 2018, and then this is the kind of second full round of updates. As you know, rail plays a big role in the state. Florida's rail systems move people and freight while reducing roadway congestion, providing safe travel options, improving air quality, and promoting economic development. This plan goes into a lot of detail on our rail system and its impact. In 2018, Florida's freight railroads carried 80.1 million tons of freight that originated or terminated in Florida. And in 2019, Florida had over 7.8 million rail passengers. And there's some new opportunities for rail in the state. In the past few years, FDOT has been aiming to create a forward-looking comprehensive strategy rather than the reactive project-by-project based approach to passenger rail of the past. So these are some of the strategies that the FDOT visioning team came up with. For passenger rail, we want to create an intercity hybrid model. Neither the public Amtrak model nor the private Brightline model is perfect for intercity passenger rail services. They both have pros and cons. We may want to develop a new hybrid model for delivering intercity passenger rail service in Florida that leverages the best attributes of the current public-private models. Preserving space in highway rights-of-way and state-owned rail corridors for future intercity and regional passenger rail services is also important. FDOT's leadership in the development of regional rail systems is critical, given the complexities associated with multiple jurisdictions and the need to enhance and supplement local technical capacity. Ensuring regional and local funding mechanisms are in place to support long-term operations before project implementation begins. And for urban systems, FDOT's role is to assist local governments in implementing the projects while balancing the needs of all modes and all users on the state highway system. And then on the freight side, freight rail is privately owned and operated, but there are areas of common interest between the state and our railroad partners. Some of these are less strategies and more focus areas. Safety, ensuring that operations continue to conform to FRA regulations. Liability, adding new passenger trains on host railroad infrastructure adds new liability risks. Capacity, sufficient track capacity is required to enable a passenger service to operate on schedule and not impair the existing and forecasted operations of current track users. Funding, agencies seeking to operate passenger service on host rail infrastructure should bear the costs associated with implementation of new service. In addition, strategies include providing new rail access to intermodal facilities, freight activity areas, transloading facilities, and promoting economic development. Another opportunity is coming through federal funding.
Stop it. They can watch it on YouTube or something, because this will be, right? We're not going to stop
I
it.
just wondered if something could be done or something wrong.
We have an audio booth.
Okay, can you guys keep monitoring that? Maybe someone try and watch it online, and then you can catch if there's a sound issue.
And just for the rest, and we on YouTube, that is.
We're going to ask them to monitor it. If someone back there can follow it on YouTube and make sure everything's audible and do whatever you need. We appreciate it. Okay, please continue.
Okay. Another opportunity comes through federal funding. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act includes new investments totaling $66 billion for passenger and freight rail over the next 5 years. This significantly increases the investment in intercity passenger rail, $36 billion over 5 years. However, $24 billion of this will be eligible for Northeast Corridor use rather than all systems nationwide. $5 billion is for the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, or CRISI grant program, which has funded numerous Florida projects, including short line improvements on the Florida Gulf and Atlantic and engineering work for Brightline's Tampa extension. Another new grant program is for railroad crossing elimination, which could be a particular area of interest for Florida communities going forward. Another $3 billion is slated for crossing projects focusing on safety and mobility, and this has been a critical priority for FDOT recently. So what are some of the needs? Over the course of creating this plan, we traveled around the state to get public input. We got a lot of great feedback from the public and our stakeholders, and we summarized Florida's passenger and freight rail needs as follows. For passenger rail, connectivity, new routes, regional hubs, connections to other modes, and first last mile connections. More departures, increased frequencies and extended service hours, accessibility and convenience for all user groups with the help of technology, corridor preservation, dedicated rail infrastructure within existing highway or utility corridors, awareness, civic engagement through outreach and marketing, safety, increased safety for riders and roadway users who interact with railroad tracks, partnership, increased coordination between FDOT, railroads, and local jurisdictions, funding, a reimagined use of transportation funds and additional funding opportunities. And then on the freight side, capacity corridors, capacity and connections for freight rail, whether through reimagining shared tracks or dedicated freight corridors, modal shift from truck to rail to ease highway congestion, reduce carbon footprint, and help solve the truck parking issue. Maintenance needs, maintenance and retention of existing corridors around the state, intermodal facilities, inland ports and inland port funding opportunities, business, more Class 1 railroads in Florida's market, safety around railroad tracks, elimination of rail and roadway conflicts, highway rail grade crossing reduction, separation, and encouraging safe behavior around tracks, coordination relationships, coordination between FDOT, freight railroads, ports, intercity passenger and commuter railroads, and local jurisdictions, and FDOT's role, expansion of FDOT's role in supporting the use and improvement of freight rail transportation. So as I mentioned earlier, part of the rail plan specifies the Rail Service and Investment Program, which is the long-term investment strategy for rail in the state. Current freight rail projects include Seaport Manatee Intermodal and Yard Extension, Operation Stride, short line infrastructure improvements, Port Miami Net Zero, Port of Palm Beach capacity expansion, Tampa Bay Port Authority Berth 214, Seaport Manatee track rehabilitation, and the B-Rail Smart campaign. And current passenger projects include on the rail transit side, Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Network, Tampa Streetcar Extension, Broward County Light Rail, Miami-Dade Smart Plan, Miami Metro Rail improvements in the downtown intermodal terminal, Miami Metro Mover improvements, the Metro Mover Guideway superstructure structural retrofit. And then on the commuter rail side, Sunrail Extension, Phase 2 North and Phase 3, Sunshine Corridor, Tri-Rail facilities, stations and improvements, Northeast Corridor Rapid Transit Project, Broward Commuter Rail, Jacksonville Commuter Rail, Tampa Commuter Rail, Palm Beach County Coastal Link, and Tri-Rail Coastal Link. So looking forward, both the Corridor ID and federal state partnership grants are aimed at intercity passenger rail. Corridor ID is brand new, and it's intended to create a pipeline of rail projects that develop from concept through early development stages to then be funded with other grants and programs through construction and operation. And the Fed-State partnership previously focused on state of good repair and has been adjusted this year to include greater focus on new, expanded, and improved intercity passenger rail projects. FDOT is currently pursuing corridor ID applications to support further development of several rail corridors identified during the rail system plan process. Specifically, we're looking at connections between Miami, Orlando, Tampa, and Jacksonville, as they have the highest travel demand potential. At this point, FDOT has not specified an operator for these corridors. Selection was about service level. Corridor ID applications to connect these major population centers will focus on new, enhanced, restored, and/or increased service frequency for those connections. And the intended outcome of this round of applications would be funding for service development plans to continue to refine the needs and corridors for further development. FDOT is also currently pursuing a Fed-State partnership grant to continue development of the Tampa to Orlando corridor with Brightline. This corridor has gotten very complex with the ongoing conversations with many partners in Central Florida regarding Sunrail and Brightline and the Sunshine Corridor. So the application scope is likely limited to NEPA, as additional project development considerations are still being discussed. And Amtrak is also pursuing a federal-state partnership grant for station improvements in Central Florida. This includes upgrades to station facilities and grounds for ADA compliance and platform improvements. FDOT's participating by sharing information as needed and currently reviewing a letter of support. So to kind of wrap everything up, the draft plan is currently available online, and we're going to be publishing it soon. The public comment period ended in February, and there will be an annual opportunity for new MPOAC rail project priorities. So with that being said, I think I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Diana. All right. Good morning, Elizabeth Watkins, Hillsborough TPO staff. Diana did a great job of explaining freight planning at the statewide level, and we wanted to give just some information on how MPO freight and rail priorities feed into that process, and generally how freight and rail planning are handled through the MPO AC Freight and Rail Committee. So the MPO Advisory Committee was established back in 2013 to foster and support freight planning and other freight initiatives, specifically to identify and prioritize different freight projects. But in 2021, that scope was expanded to include passenger rail. So one of the unique and strong things that happens in Florida through the MPOAC is we have a statewide project prioritization framework for projects. And these were created in response to new and bolstered federal funding programs. So back in 2018, when the Freight Priorities Program was established, it was so because the FAST Act greatly expanded opportunities for freight projects in that surface transportation legislation. And then in 2023, we are working on a passenger rail priorities program similar to the freight priorities program to identify and prioritize projects at a statewide level for passenger rail. And the impetus for that was the bipartisan infrastructure law, which increased passenger rail funding opportunities by orders of magnitude. So here is a map from the 2022 Freight Priorities Project list. So all the MPOs have opportunities to work with their district offices, their freight partners, municipalities, and operators to identify their top freight projects. So those projects are identified and prioritized through this statewide system and then submitted to FDOT for inclusion in their freight planning program. And why this really matters is because it gives a shared collaborative forum for MPOs to communicate priorities through FDOT through this statewide organization. It's an opportunity to coalesce around projects that are important both at the regional and state level. It positions us to better compete for formula funds and discretionary funds and promotes that coordinations between district freight coordinators, which is so important. So back in 2021, the projects that were submitted and prioritized for this received 60 million in an HFP. And I think part of that success is due to that collaboration all the way from the local to the state level. So all the MPOs are hard at work at submitting their 2023 freight priorities and will be doing so by the end of next week. And then that will be submitted to FDOT in May for inclusion into their freight planning processes and their freight funding decisions. So that's all I had. I'm sure Diana and I would be happy to take any questions that the Alliance may have.
And when we are done with the questions, we're going to reboot our feed, and that will improve the connection. Yes.
Good morning, thank you. Diana, this is Gina Driscoll, St. Petersburg City Council, representing Forward Pinellas and PLCA. So wearing a few hats for the same purpose. Thank you so much for the presentation. My question is regarding the information that was on slide number 3. And specifically, the number of rail passengers that was indicated here. The note says that this does not include Beltline or rail transit systems. I understand why Beltline would not be included, but can you tell us why rail transit systems are excluded? Because I think we're seeing that that's becoming a larger player, especially in our urban areas. Miami and Orlando have robust rail transit within their cities and within their areas. So I feel like we're missing something by not including those numbers. We think of the reason. Well, Secretary Green. Thanks, wait till. I'm sorry, I don't know what just happened. They asked them to read after the questions, but.
No, they're still in, but
They're still in.
They can't hear us, so we can't hear them.
So did we reboot now?
No, it's just
Hey, sorry, no, we can hear. We were just having some issues rejoining. Stefano, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, and the audio was coming in a little broken out here. If someone could help repeat the question from the audience.
Sure. Thank you. Are you hearing me all right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Terrific. During early in the presentation with the number of rail passengers that was quoted, the number of passengers for rail transit systems was not included. So I was just looking for an explanation as to why those numbers are being excluded as we look at the importance of rail transit growing as our state grows.
Yeah, so we have commuter rail numbers. We just don't have your more urbanized rail numbers. I believe those numbers were reported in the statewide transit plan. If it hasn't been published yet, I believe it will be soon. And the real focus here was just looking at the overall Amtrak numbers and the intercity passenger rail numbers, which in this case would be Brightline, along with the state commuter rails. And that is the mandate from the Federal Rail Administration. And at the same time, the department took it upon itself to update its statewide transit plan. So I'm almost certain the numbers are presented there. We can follow up with that information.
Yeah, that would be great to know that. And then I appreciate the information on the plans for the enhancing inner city. And I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about the intercity, creating an intercity hybrid model, as was mentioned as one of the strategies for passenger. What would the hybrid, what's the hybrid part of that?
Yeah, so you're referring to the corridor ID program that the federal administration is currently open for submitting projects. Diana, do you want to answer that part?
Yeah, I think she was actually referring more to the strategy about that the Epcot Vision team came up with a couple years ago when they were working on the passenger rail strategies. There's not a whole lot of information that I can give you about that hybrid other than that concept that, you know, the Amtrak model, you know, it's definitely more affordable, but you could say that it's less reliable. The Brightline model, on the other hand, is a little bit more expensive, perhaps more reliable, that private side model. And so the department was just interested in exploring kind of, is there an option that falls between those? So that's, again, that's a strategy. There's not a concept in place, but that's something that we're looking at and we're thinking about.
Thanks, Diana. And yeah, I missed
Go ahead,
that
finish
question.
Just so I can understand, I like to, well, I've ridden the rail in Dallas, and there's commuter rail, and then there's rail within the city, so is that what you're speaking about when you're talking about intercity passenger rail? I mean, what is intercity passenger rail?
So right now, your Amtrak network is considered intercity, and so is Brightline.
But intercity is from one city to another, not within the city.
Correct.
Okay, so I had it in my mind.
That's correct, ma'am.
Yeah, I think I would like to see the list that you talk about with all the rail projects in the state and the locations, and I would be interested in maybe some of the other board members have more of what find. Mr. Marion?
I'm on to commission that we're going to go as part of the cost of the service. Without seeing actually to what we might do to our sign, they go to the issues. And DC or the middle of this, is driving a little bit. Talking by 72 different groups, federal agencies around there. We got some 2 groups about the area. And talking over the string, and then both trying to move the system up and get to all the strong with it. So 5% of the capacity of trying to CSX forward to come to the table to try to work, which I get like the biggest trying to come with that. They all said pretty much nothing much they can do with the CSX or with federal so I'm going to go to federal administration and maybe after I in the other state, she's going to really try to work on what's going to actually work with it. Try to improve it. And should like.
Secretary.
Yeah. This is working. Well. So, don't really like to speak holistically for FDOT as a whole, but as it relates to the Central Florida, Central West Central Florida, I think pretty clearly CSX, what they would expect before they want to sit down with a and that was, what is your plan? Who's going to operate and fund it? And, they also talk about some liability issues. But until we get that worked out, so we're going to have much of an opportunity to go with CSX. So we don't know who would operate it, we don't know how it would be funded from the local. They did also express that they no longer are interested in doing like they did on Sunrail, where they would sell the line to us and list back the opportunity to operate straight on it off hours when Sunrail is not running. They said their business model has now changed to where they envision the opposite, is where they would continue to own it to somebody for that. So I believe we haven't figured out how we would operate and maintain it. And so I think until we get to that point, we just don't have anything to get CSX interested in coming and spending their time talking to us. Right, and that's the problem. They've got home control, and so they're going to change federally before I think it's going to get effective. I know it's going to work because clearly when they come to a full presentation a few years back saying, here, this line going, this line available, works great for the region, we start working on it another 2 years later, I would change their mind. Without them even taking the key infrastructure piece out of it and going with it all. And until the feds change the rules for CSX and all the other airlines across the nation, everyone else will be starting the same situation. And the project costs.
Mr. Kim. I was at the same meeting with Congressman Pastor, kind of people there to talk to CSX, and my experience, what I heard was that first of all, they've got the force in the track, so they're going to have interest just like anybody who owns their piece of land or whatever else in how that proceeds forward. So it isn't publicly on tracks. We did have that opportunity for publicly on tracks, but some of our just single-handedly just missed that $2.4 billion public investment that we could have had. That being said, the CSX tracks are privately owned, but we had quite a big group and we talked to them for some time. And to me, those seem, they're not the barrier. The barrier is, of course, they're going to want. And they're going to know how, if it's serious, why should they sit around and just talk to us forever without any kind of serious plan on our part or offer or any, consideration? And I would not do that if I were on the track. So I don't think the barrier is CSX and the fact that they're on the track, because it is, at least in Hillsborough County, at least the parts that we've talked about are under very diminished use. And they seemed actually reasonably and very open to me and open to other options. What they weren't open to was some kind of as I heard it, to take out the track and put a road in. That wasn't something that they were amenable to. But because they would still like to use it, perhaps for this freight, much like they do in Sunrail at night, which seems incredibly efficient on the track. But with that said, I just say I didn't find the barrier to be CSX. It's whether we are willing to make an investment, or that investment would be what that would be.
Treasurer, does the state continue with the position that if CSX owns the rail, we can't participate with the state can't help fund it? What's the position? Just that might need people, so.
Right, well, that would be a long conversation, negotiations that we'd have to go through, so we can't really say at this point yes or no to things that we don't know at all, the parameters might be. One of the we're going to use the CSX line, for instance, as a commuter rail. They would require us to make significant upgrades to those lines. We probably have to go replace most of the existing track and double track, if not all of it, most of it, because we want to be able to have trains going in both directions. You can't have this train go out and back and back and back, which may require right-of-way acquisition, may require a lot of reconstruction of the bed and the big crossings, probably going to be the crossings. It requires significant, probably require a lot of the crossings to be closed because they don't want to have all those crossings with a significantly higher train volume. But we'll probably require a lot of investment in train control systems and all that. I mean, they're going to want us to pay for it because they'll find out when you trade it now the way we've got it. Whether we would lease that back, likely what would happen is the locals would have to lease that from CSX if they're going to operate the way it was done. Somewhere we bought it, and that created a different environment than the one that would be what was leased. But we still own all the improvements that we invest in.
And so it's not an easy, yeah, we would do it, no, we wouldn't do it. You'd have to see all the details laid out. And then more importantly, and I would agree with Commissioner Kemp on this, more importantly, how are you going to pay for it for both the capital improvements, which would be significant, and the ongoing operations and maintenance? Who's going to contribute to that? And what is the agency that would operate and maintain it? Would it be a new agency that would be created that would be a multi-county agency? Would it be a single transit agency that wants to take it on as their? So just too many questions at this point that we don't have the answers to.
And in my mind, this is the same conversation we had 10 years ago or so, which led us to the cost feasible position of looking at BRT for now. But anyone else want to speak about anything concerning rail? Mr. Kemp.
I'll just say a couple things here is the rail at Sunrail. The right of way and the rail was bought by the state, totally the states without, they didn't even try to pass a sales tax there. It was totally purchased, the right of way, the tracks, the whole infrastructure, the entire project, 100 miles was done by the state of Florida, as well as 7 years of operations. And as well, we don't even know where those operations will go now because they didn't successfully pass any kind of tax. So that is all being paid for by the state. And it was at about $20 million a mile then. I realize that's different, but it wasn't that long ago in a region so different from us. And they had significant challenges there in that their rail was much more significantly used. So any of the things we talk about, train control, positive train control, or any of those other things are things that were and are included in their track and project now that they paid $0 for. Just for the record, I think that's important to understand. And the other is that we never actually also priced out or figured out how, we never really figured out any plan for how the BRT would be paid for, or that investment as well. That was never part of our discussion and hasn't been, but just again, for the understanding of it, I think that's equally true.
1 second, Commissioner Mariano. I just want everyone to know our audio has been fixed. Did you want to say something?
Real quick, just wanted to go back to the Sunrail for a minute because she's correct. The state paid for not just the purchasing of the right of way, but also some improvements on the S line, which is where a lot of their trains were going to be diverted to, and the intermodal center down in Winter Haven. One of the requirements that was required before any of that happened was that there was an interlocal agreement between the 4 counties, the city of Orlando, that committed to the 25% investment in the capital cost of the project, as well as the agreement to operate and maintain after 7 years. That has been problematic. It's been more than 7 years. They have not been able to yet take it over. So I'm sure the next time they'll probably be looking for a better certainty that when 7 years comes, you can take it over and operate and maintain it. But they also, one of the things that they did was Metroplan, which is their regional MPO, made that project the #1 priority for the entire region covered by Metroplan. That carried a lot of weight when they went, and they were fortunate to have a federal champion in John Micah. That they were able to go and say the entire metropolitan area of Orlando has made this their #1 transportation priority. And so I think something of that type of a statement by the MPOs, or if there was a regional MPO, or if not, the individual MPOs in the region, you kind of have to make that sort of commitment before I think the state would say, we want to come in and spend all this money. They want to make sure that it is the priority for the region, that there is support for operating and maintaining it, and that there is a commitment to provide the 25% capital investment on the project.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Secretary Gwynn. It's really even talking about the CSX line is the cart before the horse. First, we have to have the vehicle, and we don't have that vehicle right now. Commissioner Mariano?
So I'm gonna go back to the problem as far as CSX not being here, not talking about it. They came to us, had to be 7, 8 years ago. They said, look, we're gonna have a line from Mosey running through Oldsmar, running down to St. Pete. We're then gonna have we have the other line running from the city of Tampa all the way up to Brooksville. Those 2 lines, they said, we don't use it. It doesn't connect to our national network, which is not a critical part for us to come forward. At the time, we looked at what was going to be cost feasible, and ownership was not off the table. That was on the table, and that's what we're looking at. So for them to say, now we want to lease it to you instead, that sets up a whole other set of financing parameters. Now you're looking at fixed numbers, you're looking at reoccurring expenses all the way through. So for someone not to think that they could be a part of a problem is beyond me.
So I want to go, okay, Commissioner Long, and then I think our next discussion is really important. So I'd like to get Commissioner Long.
Yes, and as we transition to our next discussion, I would like to remind everyone to keep in your head what I think it was Secretary Gwynn just said about the one region speaking with one voice. And I'm telling you, you can pay attention or not, but that I've heard Councilman Citro say this at our Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council meeting. That Bright Line train is coming into Tampa. Once it gets into Tampa, there aren't enough taxis, Ubers, buses, or whatever to bring all those folks over to our beaches or up into Pasco County. So if you think the traffic is bad now, just wait another couple of years when that Bright Line comes right into downtown Tampa. We have had our heads stuck in the sand for almost 50 years on moving this dial. And it is just discouraging to sit here today and listen to everybody wax on about things we've talked about a dozen times already.
Preach, sister, preach.
Well, am I wrong?
No,
Joe?
you're absolutely right.
No, you're right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. We're all elected officials. We all have large circles of influence. What the hell are we afraid of?
With that,
What?
let's get into wits.
I
Let's
mean,
lay the
honest to
groundwork.
God, if we should sit here and keep on talking like we're doing today, 20 years from now, there's going to be another group of people, we won't even be here by then, sitting here saying the same damn thing. Am I wrong?
Now you put me on the spot.
Well, come on, you've been part of this discussion, and you were part of the Orlando success, were you not? Well, okay then, speak up.
Right.
I think I'm next on the.
Wait, you've got the floor. With Glenn, please take the floor.
Look at my presentation. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Whit Clanton with Port Hotels. Can you hear me all right?
No. Can that volume go up or?
Move it closer.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a rug and so.
Or at least turn them away.
Get right into it. There we go. Right, I'll do my best. Okay, all right. Well, thank you. I'm Vic Lanton, the Executive Director of Fort Pinellas, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to walk you through the memorandum of understanding, this draft that's in front of you. I'm not going to cover all the whereas clauses and all the statements in there because we got it in the packet, and I would expect that this will take some time to percolate. I just want to set a little bit of context. First of all, the Southern Coast Transportation Planning Alliance, of which we are a part, we are a subcommittee, has been created and has been around in state statutes and not in state statutes for a very long time, since at least the early 1990s. And we are a forum for coordinating and collaborating. And frankly, this organization was created as a result of the governor's letter. I think it was in 1990, after the 1990 census, saying you need to create a regional MPO or demonstrate sufficiently why you should remain separate. And we've demonstrated sufficiently for many years why we should remain separate. But that's a little bit of context there. We are required, as a result of the 2020 census, to put together apportionment plans. We are all working on that now. I know we're at least in our second iteration of a draft apportionment plan within Pinellas County for the MPO. And so it's a timely conversation because we have to send these apportionment plans to the governor for approval. And the governor certainly could accept those or could reject those and direct us to do something different. The next point is that funding is allocated to the urban area, not to the individual MPOs in the urban area. What the Department of Transportation does is they sub-allocate the federal funds that come to the TMA to the three counties based on population. So when we think about competitive and formula federal funds, that urban area designation is important. And I just think that's worth noting as well. We've had longstanding advocacy and rebuttal to forming a regional MPO. This has been on repeat for decades. I worked for the Tampa Bay Partnership when they were into this in 2005 as their consultant. And I know discussions have happened before that, even in the 70s. So the issue is not going away. And we can either continue to rebut it or we can look at ways to embrace it. And that's really the MPO, the MOU is really just to lay that foundation. Let's get some things on paper and see where we agree and see where we disagree. Finally, I'll be remiss if I don't just mention for context, we are super busy for the next 2 years adopting our federally required long-range plans that have to be done, at least in our case, by October of 2024. I think we're all in that same boat. So we are going to probably be required to take some baby steps in the next 2 years. And I really don't feel comfortable farming this out to somebody else to do. So just be aware that that's going to affect our timeline a little bit. Maybe you need to advance my slides if I'm not hitting them right. There we go. Could you advance for me? Okay. So this is a start of a conversation. This is a very draft MOU that you are all seeing for the first time. It has only been shared with our staff directors team. And this is really the first formal presentation that my board hasn't seen it. We'll be bringing it to our board after this meeting, but we wanted to get some initial direction and guidance here today. What we're trying to do is use this MOU to clarify any expectations, any assumptions, put that in writing for review and comment. And I think we just want to let this percolate for a little bit of time. Feedback today is great, but what we'd really like to do is kind of keep this on the agenda for the next couple of TMA meetings. And see where there's areas of agreement, see where there's disagreement, and also just keep in mind that we need to really look at this, as the earlier speaker said, how do you telescope between regional perspective and local perspective? And I think we can do both. And we just need to make sure there's a mechanism in place that takes into account those local needs and issues. And I know I'm very defensive and protective of the process we have in Pinellas County. I'm sure my counterparts feel the same way. So let's make sure that that fits into the framework. And then we really want to enlist the support of the public, of key stakeholders, of our local government partners, and our state and regional partners as well in going forward. And so I think the MOU is a foundation for that conversation to begin with those partners as well. MOU structure. So in this slide, I really just identified that the goal is to build a collaborative framework for discussion and decision-making and setting regional priorities as well as supporting local priorities. I think that's really key that we do both. This is not a replacement or a substitute for TMARDA. And I mean that because the NPOs have special status in federal and state law that TMARDA never had. We have a dedicated source of funding that carries out our planning activities, and we also have responsibility for controlling surface transportation block grant funds, transportation alternative funds, and we might need supplemental funding from the local governments to augment that, but that's a big difference from the TMARTA structure. Just in my own hindsight, TMARTA really may have been ahead of its time because it didn't have a project to shepherd through. And I think there was an intent that TMARTA had all these powers to maintain, operate, and build, but it needed a project to do that. I think this is really more of a planning framework rather than a project oversight and management framework. Clearly, the third point, echoing many of the speakers and the comments that we've received, is we aren't uniform across Tampa Bay. There are differences in Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough, and in our cities, and we need to respect that in whatever formation is contemplated and whatever planning mechanisms are created. And we need to ensure that there is a stable funding mechanism. And I just got done saying we get direct federal money, but that's all reimbursed. And so you've got to have that money up front that allows you to purchase equipment, pay salaries, do all these things while you're waiting on that reimbursement. And we have that in my county with the millage rate. I think every county does it a little bit differently. And I'm not going to enumerate all those, but I think we have some material in your packet of things to think about in that. Once, can you advance it again, please? Is not percent. Okay, and now I've just got a couple of bullet points to just keep me talking through. All right. Oh, we skipped a slide, but I'll just go through some of the pros and cons. I read these from my county administrator because they're asking questions about this. And this is not exclusive or exhaustive. There may be many other pros and cons that I didn't put on here, but I think it's worth noting. On the left, some pros. I think this could help build trust and collaboration in our region at a staff level, at an elected official level, and a stakeholder partner level, and a Chamber of Commerce level. Defining the transportation agenda. At the regional level, we've always been more or less in a reactive mode to what the Department of Transportation puts forward, or other entities as well. Maybe the regional MPO could help set that agenda. Aligning regional transportation with regional economic development. There's a huge void that every economic development organization has told me when the Tampa Bay Partnership changed their method of operating many years ago. There's no longer a regional economic development organization. So maybe there's an alliance there. This would be the largest NPO in Florida, and I think that matters to a degree. In terms of cons, again, many of these comments have been stated. You do have a risk, if it's not done correctly, of losing some of that influence that local smaller communities enjoy today. I've got 24 cities, and it's a lot to handle. And I think that's a legitimate question that we need to resolve. Public involvement is hard at the regional level. You need to do it locally. So that's particularly consideration. Doesn't guarantee any more funding, and the word guarantee is critical there. We get formula-based planning dollars based on the NPO urban area and the size of our population. There's no like magic switch of creating a regional NPO and you've got suddenly money for transit and money for all these other things. But it could come as a result of building consensus. Shifting the emphasis to regional projects versus local projects could be a concern. I want to state that none of the staff directors, at least that I've talked with and worked with on this MOU, feel like this is to achieve any one single project, whether it's out there and been presented or proposed. This is really a framework for considering future projects in general. So we're not trying to do this to ram something through. And then I'm particularly concerned about the last bullet point, which is the potential to weaken countywide planning, which we do land use and transportation in Pinellas. And again, it's just a con. It's something I think can be addressed, but we just need to make sure we're aware. Just some considerations. These are more just questions for you all in your mind. I'm not going to read all of these. But the last bullet point is, if you're completely satisfied with everything we're doing in this region, then maybe we don't need to take any more steps. But if you're not satisfied, does it hurt to look at a different structure and consider the possibilities of what that may be able to yield? And in terms of next steps, after today's discussion, what we would like to do is take your guidance, your comments, make any necessary refinements to this MOU as appropriate, and then bring that back to the individual MPOs for their consideration and feedback. Then we would also like to engage our local government partners and chambers and other organizations out there to get feedback. I really don't know what the city of St. Petersburg thinks about this. I really don't know what the city of Clearwater thinks about this, and I'd like to get their perspectives. And then we would need to monitor and inform you all and ourselves of anything that may happen in the state legislature, particularly going to be watching that last week of session when things get added to bills. And we would rather think of this as a local initiated effort than a Tallahassee initiated effort. And then what we would do after that consultation with our local government partners is begin looking at a potential apportionment plan and a business model, again, just for let's getting some numbers on paper. And I think in our last meeting, we presented a preliminary look at what an apportionment plan might look like. And then provide an update to you all at your September meeting. I know we have a meeting before that, and maybe that's a recap of what happened in the legislative session and the feedback we're hearing from our communities. But maybe by September, we can look at a business model and apportionment plan. So I will stop there and just turn it over to you all for discussion. Again, I wasn't going to go through the MOU. It's in your packet, but if there's questions about that, we can certainly talk.
Thank you. Just as we start the discussion, I want you to know that at our county commission meeting on Tuesday, we collectively 5-0 said we thought it was important to begin the discussions of a regional MPO. We have our fears as a small fish, but you know, the devil's in the details. And if other communities around the country can figure it out, I have faith that we can figure out how we keep our local identity, but work on a regional identity as well. So, Carl and Lisa, did you raise your hand? Maybe it was Seth.
Yeah, no, I just,
Commissioner Wade.
if it's time to go through the MOU and comments and deals to it, the seventh whereas, where it starts talking about the state of Florida has long demonstrated a lack of proper funding for regional planning, BARDA, regional planning councils, water management districts, et cetera. I think, well, I recommend that we collectively agree we remove this paragraph. Our goal needs to be to work with our state partners and not necessarily throw rocks at them. So I think we should strike this entire paragraph out of here and not necessarily bring in other regional boards into what we're trying to accomplish with this one.
Madam Chair, if I might, in response to Commissioner
Waitman.
Comments? Yes?
Yes.
I'm not sure I agree with you, Commissioner, respectfully I say, because I think we do have a role to educate and inform our legislature of the necessity for changing their strategic planning as it relates to transportation in the Tampa Bay region. If you look at what the legislature has done in other areas of the state, and clearly Secretary Gwynn is more adept at discussing this than I am, other areas of the region, and that includes their legislators, have taken a much more proactive approach to funding transportation, their regions. I mean, look at South Florida, look at Central Florida, look at Jacksonville. Tampa Bay is out in the wind somewhere. So I think continuing to have those discussions with our local delegations is critical. I mean, it doesn't have to be throwing rocks.
Commissioner Marion.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Commissioner Waitman. Really, to make that statement that we've long demonstrated a lack of proper funding, it just, why are you gonna get them fired? You
Yeah.
wanna get help, or you wanna like, again, throw rocks? Doesn't make sense to me.
Councilman Chris.
Thank you. I think I understand now where the hesitation is on that. And I think it's really that word lack of that. So, but we understand that we do need help from the state. What if we looked at this as a change to the state of Florida has long demonstrated a challenge with properly funding. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge for everyone. It's a challenge that even folks in Tallahassee are grappling with right now, as our entire state is dealing with population growth and the need for funding for so many different needs. So I would just offer, rather than striking the entire paragraph, that we consider just changing the verbiage to better express our desire for partnership and not division.
Chair.
Yes. Mr. Waitman.
Thank you. You know, I don't necessarily, definitely needs to be reworded. And I still stick with that we should probably remove water management districts. I mean, they're a special taxing district. They have the ability to raise and lower their taxes themselves. And that really doesn't have any bearing on what this group is. So I don't necessarily think their organizations need to be included within this MOU. To an extent, yeah, regional planning councils, but I think this needs to be worded in a way that extends in a handout, an olive branch, a shake of a hand, a good faith working effort. That's the tone that this MOU needs to set, and I don't believe this paragraph is written does that.
I'm going to agree that I'm not sure this paragraph is needed in here. I think it is negative, and I think we want this to be positive.
I think what we can do as staff is take your direction and guidance and see what we can do to either remove it or revise it. I agree. In fact, I did get the comment, it's been softened already once. But I think this was just a recognition that TBARTA had its funding request vetoed by the governor repeatedly, and the regional planning councils had their funding cut substantially over the last 20 years.
It's a frustration. Sometimes when I have this, I write my text down, then I delete it.
I think the commentary was well taken, and we can certainly work on a softer revision.
Yeah.
Commissioner Eggers, then Commissioner Wade, and then Commissioner Kennedy, and then that's all. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I mean, you guys shaking your head. Go ahead. I'm not trying to get ahead of you.
Okay, so all.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to share that I totally agree. We don't want this MOU to be combative. Ultimately, this is something that we need to use to bring all of us together around the region. I think it is also important to recognize that other states have done a lot more to support regional planning and coordination. And if you look at some of the larger MPOs even in our next state north of us, Georgia, and you look at what makes up the Atlanta Regional Commission, it's not only transportation, it is also the water management district. It is also growth management. It's a bunch of things that are very scattered in the state of Florida because of our state laws and the way that we manage these programs in the state of Florida. So the state of Florida has not been pro-regionalism. And I think our point as staff is to bring forward that we want a regional organization to be successful, and more than that, to be visionary, to really lead this region and get us to places that we haven't been before. We're going to, at the local level, have to put the oomph into it that isn't necessarily there under the state laws.
Mr. Kemp? Well, I was looking this way, so I didn't look there, so
Okay.
just take care of that.
Just a couple of things. One is, I don't think there's ever been an issue about funding a road. In fact, I think if everybody here agreed that a road shouldn't be funded, it would still be funded somehow or continue to be funded. I don't think that's ever been an issue. So what we're talking about is transit. And I know in here it says regional planning bodies. I wasn't even sure what that referred to, but now I get what you're saying, which are every place all over the state, and they've been reduced, and the DCA has been taken away, which was part of that function of the regional planning councils, and we have the water management districts. But in terms of any transit planning agency, they're not funded by the legislature either. Zero. I mean, we get our money from the federal pass-through for these organizations. So there's not any of that. But what the legislature has funded, and the only thing they funded in transit, we get our MPO, we get our bus matches, occasional operating for 3 years kinds of routes, maybe sometimes a little longer. But on a permanent basis, what they funded or invested in terms of transit, other than the match, which they have out there, is full funding for rail systems, including in the 70s, the rail in...
They have a dedicated trust fund.
In Miami, West Palm, Tri-Rail, Sunrail, and I don't know if there's been, I think those are the only major, they're funding transit systems. And I've heard so much about SEFRA, but SEFRA is just the agency that runs the Tri-Rail. It's not planning. So I would just say that there hasn't been money for any. So, I mean, any planning agencies, and they invest in transit systems that people, to rail systems. That's what we're talking about, basically. I don't know if there's other information about that. I'd be happy to hear it, but I don't know of any other information in terms of that.
Okay, so I have then Commissioner Eggers, then Commissioner Waitman, then Piccolo, is that right? And then me. Okay.
Thank you. First of all, appreciate the conversation. And I think this is an opportunity for us to be leaders in the area, to kick this project off, to kick this collaborative discussion off is really what this is all about. To me, it's something that we should have been doing some time ago. We always seem to have issues when we get into regional items. For crying out loud, we've been trying to have a county commission meeting with other county commissions for 6 years and haven't been able to do it. And I think we're going to be able to do that next month, perhaps.
Done.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. I think we have to be able to sit in the room and talk and be able to discuss the items and the issues. Clearly, we're all different. Rick, our county of Pinellas County is very different from area to area. Sometimes we have to really battle and fight it out and make sure that we're all being covered. So I don't think that's anything new for any of us. So I think the partnerships with the cities and the counties, chambers and businesses all have to be at the table. You made the comment that the mechanism for regional improvement has to include the mechanism to protect our local efforts. And I had like a picture of this, and I try to say it sometimes, and it never comes across very well, but I'll try it again. And that is the kind of an hourglass, and where the one part of the hourglass is a kind of a regional effort, and we're really working for that regional effort, and the other part is for our local efforts. And the conflicts are in the middle, where the sands are running between it, and that's where we have the real
battles not only within our own county, but, between cities. For crying out loud, if I remember 2 years ago, Pinellas County MPO said, let's make the number one priority for this region, State Road 60, I-275 interchange. It took us about 5 months to get everybody on board for that project, number one project, to somebody's point about, let's have a number one project. That was the number one project. We got the $1.2 billion for this area. The governor came out a year ago, I think, and said, we've got to move that project up. It's that important. So I think we were pretty good as a region on that. And I think we can do a lot more of that. And I think this mechanism is just a way to start having a conversation about something I think is extremely important. We do Tampa Bay water pretty well. Is it perfect? No. Do we have arguments? Yes. But we're all at the table. And we're listening to South Hillsborough County that's having water issues to their residents. And we're trying to make those adjustments. So I do think we have the opportunity to really explode and do a much better job. I'll say it one more time about the CREW, which is Commercial Real Estate for Women, has an annual meeting. And they always bring the same economist back. And he continues to say the same thing, that this region can be probably the number one region in the country economically if we get our governments together. Because we have universities, they don't care about boundaries. You got businesses, they don't care about boundaries. Governments seem to care about boundaries, which we have to, obviously. That's why we're elected and all that stuff. But I do think that is very important. So I think this is something that I think is long overdue, and we can show the leadership of collaboration and conversation. That's all we're talking about right now. I'm trying to keep an open mind to, let's leave it like it is in our recommendation, but also an open mind to saying at the end of all of this, maybe we need to move forward with that other. That's kind of the way I'm leaning right now. But I mean, this is what the conversation is going to be about. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Waitman.
Thank you. I assume we're still working on the MOU comments?
Yes.
Okay.
And signing the MOU.
Yes.
And moving forward with that.
So along with the rewriting, or I'm still the way it's written, of striking the paragraph as it is, number 7, just deleting it altogether unless it's written in a different way. The third paragraph, whereas since 1990, the governor's desire, the governor of Florida has had a desire that the 3 MPOs in urban areas consolidate to a single MPO. I was 4 years old, so that's 32 years ago. So I would think that if the governor wanted it over that period of time, that this would have happened. So I don't know, reading that, I'd figure I'd just bring that to the group and see what's your perspective on kind of what that statement could look like. So
if I can just answer the question about why that is. After every census, there's usually a letter sent by the governor to the MPOs saying, since this has happened, you need to update your planning boundary and your apportionment plan. And there's, at least in our region, with that letter has come special instructions related to the merger. Mm-hmm. Not every MPO has gotten the same letter, but they all get some expectations letter for reapportionment. So it's been an ongoing thing. I think the letter, and I'd love to be able to dig up a copy of the original letter we got from, was it Lawton Childs? I don't remember who the governor was at that time, but
see.
Yeah, exactly. I was considerably older than 4 though. But what it did is it gave us an out, and it said, unless you can sufficiently demonstrate these differences. So we were able to do that. And it wasn't a heavy hand that thou shalt do it. But conditions are different today than they were in 1990. So that's just why it's in there. We can certainly modify that if that's the will of the group.
And that's all I have. Chair Starkey.
Wait, I think I'm next. Nope. Councilman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to make some statements, but I'll save that for later on why I'm against this. But seeing the writing on the wall, there is a couple of in the MOU under the let it be resolved. Bullet point number 3. Regional MPO must reflect a proportional representation of its governing board based on the population of local governments within the MPO planning boundary. I can't emphasize this enough, and many people around this table have heard me say this, and I'm going to sound redundant to them, but Some people haven't heard me say this before. The population of the city of Tampa doubles each and every day between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The city of Tampa must have more representation, especially if this is going to be a regional MPO. That's my number one point. My number 2 point is governance structure. Number 4 bullet point, governance structure of the regional MPO may include representation from transportation agencies as voting members. I have fought long and hard for the TPO of Hillsborough County to retain the Port of Tampa, Tampa International Airport, and THEA. I'll give you 2 cases in point where their vote was necessary. We had the West Shore interchange, which affected the airport. And we also had the bypass for the Leroy Selman, which affected the port. With transportation coming out of the airport, transportation coming out of the port, their opinions and their votes are necessary. And I want to make sure that on this regional, if we go regional, that the Port Tampa Bay and the airport are also included in this. Madam Chair, I thank you for your time and allowing me to speak, but I am going to give my reasons why I'm against this later on.
Thank you. You know, I agree that the airport and the port maybe should have some kind of voice on here. And I don't know enough about that one to say if they should or not, but to me, those are details that get fleshed out as we go through the process more in depth. I would say to you that those residents that are coming to Tampa are our residents from Pasco County, and we are growing, and we're going to send a lot more your way. So we.
Madam Chair, if I may, I wanted to say this for later on, but you brought it up. Our population doubles, and it's population from Pinellas, Pasco, Polk, Sarasota, Manatee, Hernando, and Citrus County. And they're traveling into the city of Tampa each and every day. But the lives they're impacting the most are not their own. They're the citizens of Tampa on the roads, county roads, and the interstates that are being traveled on. Those employees, those people that go to the sporting events, those people that go to the airport, the truck transportation that takes cargo in and out of our port each and every day, don't live in the city of Tampa. It's our citizens that are being affected the most by this transportation.
So, yes. Okay, you can put yours down. I'll put mine down. Secretary Gwynn.
So I really just wanted to add, I've heard the state thrown out a bunch of times and talking about the state. And we're obviously an agency of the state. We're not the state itself, but we are an agency of the state. And I've been asked a bunch of times by a lot of people what our position is on a regional MPO. And I just want to make sure, you know, we certainly understand that there's a divergence of opinions from people from a lot of different perspectives. But from the perspective of the district and the FDOT, you know, we are more of a regional authority, if you would. I mean, we're statewide, but our district oversees 5 counties, primarily the Tampa Bay region. And when we're laying out our plans, we really don't look at, is this in one county, another county, although we do work collaboratively with the counties and the MPOs to find projects in their areas that may not necessarily be a statewide priority, but is a priority for that. So it's kind of like we're not looking just at statewide and regional priorities, but we're also looking very closely at the local considerations as well. The major parts of our funding are for projects that are regional in nature. The strategic intermodal system funding, which is by far the biggest part of the funding that's available throughout the state, it's not done on a county by county basis. It's done on a regional and statewide basis. We are competing with everybody else in the state for that pot of money. And although I think somebody said we always have enough money to do all the road projects, I can show you a ton of road projects that each county has asked for that I don't have the money for right now.
Right.
But I can also tell you, and we compete with other regions for that money. And I went a couple of months ago to our statewide meeting we're going over the 5-year work program, and I can tell you, we got less than Jacksonville and Orlando. I don't know all the reasons for that. There's probably a multitude of reasons. One thing I hear consistently from a lot of people, and I've also heard this from people in the federal government who look at all the grants that are out there for federal projects now with the new bill, and they're competitive as well. The bigger you come and present yourself, the more clout you have. And although I respect the fear, if you want to call it that, of some folks that look at this to say, I'm going to get hurt by this because I won't have as many people on the board. I won't be as big of a fish in this pond. The pond's bigger, I'm littler. I try to look at it from, we're going to make the pond way bigger. I think if Hillsborough County goes looking for something as a 1.3 million person county, all right, they're going to compete with Duval County or some of the other counties that are that size. Pasco County will compete with, I don't know what other county, St. John's or Seminole or Osceola. Pinellas will compete with another county. With 3.2 million people in an MPO, we would be the largest MPO. We would have more state and federal electeds that would be within the limits of the MPO. And when we prioritize things as a region, I do believe that we would be able to be more successful in bringing more money to the entire region, which by nature, I would think would benefit everybody. It would, all boats should rise if the tide rises, right? That's how I try to look at it. I understand and I respect the opinions of the others that have different, but I do think that if we look at it from what could go wrong, missing with what could go right. And I think there's a lot that could go right if we bring a 3.2 million person region collectively and collaboratively together to compete for major projects. So I would just throw it out there. We support it, but we also understand that it's not a unilateral decision on our part, obviously, but we would support you looking at it and considering it and looking for what opportunities might lie within that.
And I agree with you 100%. And I would think that, we're okay, this is an analogy. Pasco County has never done a septic to sewer conversion. We haven't done one. I learned from another county how they tackled that problem and received federal funding. They hired someone to come in and do a look at all their septic problems, classified it in A, B, C, and D, and said, we're going to fix A first. They went to the feds, they went to the state, and they got the money to fix it. So I think if we're all together and we identify the most pressing problem that will make the biggest bang for the buck, we're all going to get behind it and fix problem 1. Then we will all get together and fix problem 2, right? And we'll knock down that list. And when the Secretary Gwynn came to us with that West Shore interchange fix, that's a regional problem that we all got behind. It just because it's in Tampa didn't mean we weren't going to support it. We signed it without question. And I feel that kind of behavior would continue. We just would be strengthened by this regional approach. And when I mentioned that it's, a lot of Pasco County residents commute to Tampa, they want to see that road system better as well because they're driving around it too. So I do think that that's probably that area, that inner core of the Tampa Bay area is the most important place to start and to fix it. And we spoke out. So I'm in support of fixes for your community because it's a lot of my residents that are driving around there and they need to get to work as well. So
I agree.
yeah, Commissioner Mariano?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we look at working as a group and that one voice thing, it matters a lot. When you get that population behind it. And, I'm very pleased to say that, I think the TMA has been very positive every time we're making recommendations. And it's been very, very easy just to make, do we support this, this, and this all the way through? And I think only the last meeting was the first one we had a project that we didn't get behind, but we did put a letter of support on it. Councilman Citro, when you think about this, all the businesses that are supported by people coming into that city, I think you should be saying thank you. Not like it's a hindrance. This is like a good thing for you guys to get our people spending money in your county.
Yeah.
And you know, the rail line that we talked about with CSX, do you realize the minuscule amount it's going to affect Pasco County to any degree? But over time, as it grows out and gets stronger and spines connect to it, you know, from going out, it gets better and better for the whole region. That's why I push that so hard to go forward. Look at State Road 54. We take a lot of Hillsborough and Pinellas people going back and forth. We've had to fund that road on ourselves. I'm delighted to say that, you know, at the previous meeting, the two Pinellas County commissioners made the recommendation that we make the 4154 interchange a priority. And I thank for that, and I think that shows the camaraderie of let's get in here. Let's get it right for the region. But if we can get a better shot, as we did for the state money for projects, the biggest boost, and I'm glad you brought it out, was the federal money that we can get coming together as a region. Now, everyone's going to have their own issues, and frankly, I got people from Shady Hills here today. Those small roads, they don't just get done either. That takes project. We've been working with Secretary Gwynn for about 3 years now. We finally got a solution on County Line Road between Pasco and Hernando coming together. Finally get it solved. Big issues. So I am concerned about getting those little things done, but the bigger thing is the bigger pot of money we can get together.
Then that leaves us more money to fix the other problems. So,
Madam Chair, if I may, Commissioner Mariano, I always thank people that come into the city of Tampa for their tax dollars, leaving them in within our city. To your point, it has always been, and no offense to Hillsborough County, it's been a problem with trying to find transportation dollars, that 25% matching funds. Yes, we're going to get a heck of a lot more money from the state and from the feds. But until we get that 25% matching funds, what are we really going to get?
but
Nothing.
you have no option but to figure this out. You really don't. For your constituents, we must figure this out.
Madam Chair, you are more than likely correct. But the monies that are in that pot that gets spread out more for the main part, for the hub of transportation in the Bay Area, is not doing Tampa any good. And again, no offense to any other city or county, but Tampa is the transportation hub. We got Brightline coming, as Ms. Long said, but there is no transportation hub. There's no multimodal transportation hub at the end.
I was calling you.
How are we going to move people off that Brightline coming from Orlando or going from Tampa International Airport to Orlando to the attraction?
So do you want to figure that out yourself and pay for it, the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County yourself? Or do you want the region to work with you to figure that out? That's kind of that's the question, I guess.
My answer is I don't want Tampa to get lost in the shuffle.
I don't think anyone wants anyone to get lost in the shuffle. So whatever. But if we don't work together, we're going to keep sending people down there, and you're going to have to figure out the solution on your own. And so I don't think that's a good long-term solution. So I'm very much in favor of starting the baby steps towards this regional solution. Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. And I'll just say again, because we've gone into a much more general discussion. But first off, I'll just say when this was being studied, the thing that I learned in these TPOs, MPOs started in 1980s, and that there has never, ever in the country been a merger of a TPO, MPO ever. There has been divorces, never a merger. Now, there have been times when a single city already started with an urban area around it. Those are the examples of Orlando and Jacksonville. They just had an extended urban area around a single city. And that's why they originally were put in that configuration. But there's never, ever been a merger between two MPOs in the country, only divorces. While it's well known that I don't agree with the merger, and I will state that the MPOs were created to protect local populations, to protect local communities, local neighborhoods, And diverse, disadvantaged communities. All of what the roadways that we're talking about with investment go through and impact and economically impact and have hurt Hillsborough County in terms of our abilities with these massive roadways. It hurts the structure of our city, our economic opportunity. But debates in the region, and we all know this, debates in the region have been largely about the impacts on Hillsborough County residents over and over again. Hillsborough is the largest county. I know Secretary Gwen said 1.3 million, it's 1.5 million. And Pinellas is about 1 million, getting close to that, has been there since 1995 and has really not changed. We know Pasco's growing, Pasco's getting close to 600,000, but 1.5 million and growing. We're just about the third largest county in the state now because we're getting bigger than Palm Beach County, probably by this year. But Hillsborough is the largest county, the most populous, the most diverse of any of the counties, the youngest. And the impacts are all about Hillsborough County. And I'd say what is missing from this agreement is that we have to agree that we should have the regional MPO must be located in Hillsborough County, where these impacts are, where the majority of the population, if this is done, and I don't agree with it, but it must be physically located in Hillsborough County.
Madam Chair, I didn't want to do this, but I have to speak to the disingenuous comments that have just been made by Commissioner Kemp. There are several areas in the country where one MPO has been established as a region. To say that that has never happened is insane because obviously I don't think you speak for Texas or Connecticut or California or Atlanta, number one. And number two, just because it's never been done doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be done. And that's what leadership is all about. And to demand that everything else stop until Tampa is in the center of everything. If it was so successful, Hillsborough County wouldn't be, I don't mean Tampa, I mean Hillsborough County. If it was so successful, Commissioner Kemp, Hillsborough County wouldn't be having the problems with its transit center that it is today. And you keep talking about the dysfunctional transit agencies. I promise you, PSTA is not dysfunctional. Thank you.
Commissioner
Can I just respond? Because it was
No.
said to me, I would like to respond. Just because.
1 minute.
Just one thing is, one, I didn't say anything about dysfunctional transit agencies. But secondly, the merger is accurate information unless something's happened in the last 2 years. That's what our studies showed. And I didn't say there weren't any merged MPOs. I said, like Orlando or Jacksonville, the only time that that's happened in the country is when they were formed in the 80s that way because they were an urban area around a single city. I didn't say there didn't exist any. I said since they have existed, there hasn't been any mergers between different ones.
Okay, Commissioner Waitman.
Thank you. Commissioner Eggers made up a very good point. Prior to becoming a Pasco commissioner, I'm in this job 150 days, and I was a much younger man 150 days ago.
It'll age you.
Yeah, prior to that, I served on SwiftMud Regional Board. We worked with our friends at Tampa Bay Water, which I now serve on, and met Commissioner Eggers, and we funded East County's, significant water transmission line project. We knew that project single-handedly, and I'll get to my point of this, that project single-handedly is going to suck CFI funding from SwiftMud, the district, for the next 10 years, and take cooperative funding initiative funds down to virtually nothing, because the regionalism in the thought process behind the SwiftMud board, governing board, and the leaders on Tampa Bay Water said, this is a project that we need to all invest in, right? We got it done to a tune of Swift Mud of $500 million plus. This thing is a very significant project. It's a terrific project. It's bringing a much needed need to the health and the services of Hillsborough County. And that's where it showed that when the rubber hit the road, we figured it out. We got water, a significant life source to our community where it needed to go. As a regional board, we think bigger. And how are we going to do this? Well, we think bigger as a regional board, but our job as city council folks, as commissioners, that's our job. That when we come home to sit at our county and city dais and represent our counties, that's where we go fight for the shady hills of the world locally. That's our job. That's our job as elected officials, to fight for those smaller communities. We're in our county and our city boards, and we take care of the smaller regions here at a local level. But when we go and we think bigger, the major roadways and how we flow, the flow of traffic when Brightline comes into Tampa, once our Moffett Center in Pasco is built, they're going to come into Tampa. They're going to come travel westward, and they're probably going to try to figure out a way to make north up to where the Moffett Center is going to be built off the Suncoast Parkway, right? So there's going to be a flow of traffic. So to think bigger as a regional board is important. And where we don't lose, or I think, this is my opinion, where we don't lose that local focus is when we're sitting with our own collective bodies. And that's where our job as elected officials and leaders of our communities, to take care of the smaller pockets of our communities and make sure our local dollars go and are sufficiently, being invested where they need to be to help. So I say that is, I think we need to realize there's two different ways of governing here, collectively, regionally, and then when we talk about our smaller pockets or our underserved areas. I think that's the role of our local governments, of when we're working on our local boards together, where those details are hashed out. So we don't want the bigger picture to get lost. There's two different lanes, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here. And so I just urge people to have faith in each other as leaders of our communities and of our region, that, hey, there are examples out there of folks from all different walks of life in different parts of our world coming together to help other parts of our world to create a better quality of life. So I just want that sentiment to be shared as my first meeting on this board. So
Very well
thank
said.
you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Waitman. Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I've got not that, it matters to anybody here, but I have a contract on a home that's expiring at noon. And I have 2 or 3 other offers that are coming in. So I'm gonna have to step out, and I'm certainly supporting moving this thing forward. But I just want to make a couple of comments. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I know we've seen some numbers before where the arrows are pointing both ways, from Pinellas to Pasco and Pinellas to Tampa or Hillsborough County, about work traffic. There's a substantial number of workers coming. We're the number 2 manufacturing county in the state. A lot of people come in from Pasco, from Hillsborough County. And so it is huge. We have 15 million visitors that come to our county. Yep. A lot from your county, a lot from your county, and a lot from our own county for our tourism and our beaches. And we have 1 million residents, as Commissioner Kemp spoke about, but we also, as I said, have 15 million throughout the year on our roads traveling. So we have impact too. We all have impact. And so I just think, I'm just hoping that we can take this conversation. I like the comment, the thought that you had about making a bigger pond of money that we can go after. When the tides rise, we all benefit from it. But you've got an airport that's so critical to art. You've got the shipping that's so critical to us. We've got a little baby airport. It's international. Trust me, the numbers are through the roof. And they go to little cities that your airports don't go to. So people from Hillsborough come over to go to those little airports around our country. We could all line up and start trying to, who does more and who gets more and who does this. And look, you guys are so important to our region. You guys are, and I think we are too. I think let's just put that aside and figure out what we can do to work together. And in the end, we may not get there. We may not be able to come up with the mechanisms that protect. And I think 24 cities we have to worry about. now. We have a model that worries about those 24. I think that's a good, we can bring those conversations to a table so that the communities that this gentleman spoke about and the lady spoke about, and those are going to be protected. At the same time, we got to think bigger. Think bigger. Plan bigger, and hope bigger, and you never know what will come. And I think it can only be a positive. I really go back to some of the it seems to be the one regional model that works, and it's just a refreshing thing. And we sit around with 3 representatives from each county. It's not by population, which this board would be, and we still come up with solutions for Hillsborough County when it's necessary. And so I just wanted to leave that point. I think we need to work together. So, and I would support that, but I'm going to start on the side right now. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have another item on our agenda. So, that's Commissioner Eggers, right? So, while I've heard some angst from the Hillsborough and Tampa folks, I did hear some possibility about moving forward and seeing what it might look like. So, let's take the next step and maybe make some corrections to this. We don't want this to be negative. We want this to be positive, and this is exploratory. It's not committing anyone to anything, right? It's just our first step. So.
Yeah, again, just to reiterate, the next steps is we'll take your comments today, produce a second version of this, maybe a third version now, and then shop it around with our local government partners and see what feedback we get. We want to hear from Tampa. We want to hear from St. Pete. We want to hear from Dade City, everybody.
Yeah, and I'm friends with Joe Lopano. I'm going to see what he feels about it, and you are too. Let's talk to the director at the port, and just get some more regional feedback. I think we know where the business community lies with our friends at the Tampa Bay Partnership, and I think they're very obviously supportive of a regional solution. So I'd like to suggest that we take the next step.
And Madam Chair, can we also ensure that this is on our agenda going forth for the next several meetings?
Yes. Okay. So we do have a timeline on here. Okay. So you guys have this in your packet. I'm not going to read it, but we do have a potential timeline, and this we can discuss this again next time. I think go further in depth in this when we have the next iteration of what this MOU might look like. So I'd like to call up Ms. Alden for our next presentation.
Commissioner? Just real quick while she's going up, I know, and I think it was Beth who distributed out some bill language that was floating around. I know it hadn't been filed. I don't know if it's going to be filed. Just to note that that language called for a study to be done by the end of this year. So if that was to get put in somewhere and made into law, we may have to accelerate some parts of it. But just to bring that up because that was the bill that we saw.
All right, so let's make sure we're kept aware of that.
That's a great point. Thank you for that up. And actually, it was one of the concerns that we had as staff in looking at what are the steps that we would need to go through to create a regional MPO. Because we want to make sure that the funding that is available for transportation projects in this region continues to flow. And there are a lot of steps that MPOs go through to make sure that that happens. And that's what this timeline is about. It's about laying out what are some of the major steps and thinking about, do we have enough time to work with each other to come up with customized versions of each of these documents that address our shared regional vision and goals as well as our local needs. And we're going to need some time to hash through all of those things. And that's why I'm hoping that the legislature allows us to work together and step our way gradually through all of these steps. So Rick mentioned an apportionment plan and a business model, typical budget that we can start bringing back to you potentially in September Now, again, that's probably a first draft. After that, we probably need to spend some time looking on the structure. What do we have at the regional level? What do we have at the local level in terms of committees? Bylaws to support that. What are our operating procedures and financial controls? Our human resources procedures and our organizational chart. And then coordinating with the feds to make sure that we can maintain the certification. As we're all certified as individual NPOs. And how do we make that transition? Then in our third year, we're going to need some time to work out what is the new interlocal agreement among all of the member organizations of the new MPO. And all of those member organizations are going to need some time for legal review. So that's going to need to be an iterative process too. And that is, all of those steps are before you start developing your shared regional public participation plan, your shared regional long-range transportation plan, your priorities, your transportation improvement program. And all of those things need to be in place in order to make sure that the money flows to the projects that you want to see happen in this region. There's a lot of infrastructure here. And that's what this timeline is about. Now, I'm going to hit a couple of notes about one of the bullet points that Whit brought up in his presentation, which is how do we make sure that there is attention to local needs and context and local planning while we are focusing on those regional connections. And so here's one example. There are a lot of great examples around the country. And if you go to the Association of MPOs, you'll see a lot of examples. But this one is from Atlanta, our neighbor to the north. So next slide, please. The Atlanta Regional Commission is, I'm assuming that you all can change the slides for me. That's okay. The Atlanta Regional Commission, just briefly, it's 11 counties. It has a 41-member board. Again, this is something that is enabled under the state law in Georgia. So it looks very different from MPOs in the state of Florida. They are responsible for a bunch of things other than transportation, including aging services, workforce services, just water planning district. As I mentioned, growth forecasts and growth management. So there are a lot of things that can tie into and complement the regional transportation planning. And that's what we need to be thinking about. We're thinking about, so how do we set up a new regional MPO here for success? Because we don't have a state law that supports that kind of coordinated regional planning. But maybe we do it through interlocal agreements and partnerships with the other regional organizations in this area. So you need to be cognizant of it and thinking about it. Next slide, please. So the Livable Centers Initiative in Atlanta sets aside some of the surface transportation block grant money specifically for projects that support livable communities. So you can see the mission here. It incentivizes local jurisdictions to re-envision their communities as vibrant, walkable places that offer increased mobility options, encourage healthy lifestyles, provide improved access to jobs and services. Next slide, please. So how are they doing that? It starts with planning grants. So this is in summary. They've invested over $325 million in more than 130 communities. The way that this works is that the local communities are applying to ARC once a year, initially for planning grants. And then, slide. The grants that are given are an 80-20 match. The state of Florida is very generous in covering a 20% match for our surface transportation block grants here. So we might or might not need to do that kind of match. But anyway, it starts off with planning grants. This is a set aside, as I mentioned, from Atlanta's Surface Transportation Block Grant funds that they received through federal formula. It averages about $14 to $16 million a year-ish, which is long. Next slide, please. So after communities have applied for a planning grant and won that and completed their study, then they are eligible for the transportation projects identified in their planning study to receive implementation dollars. And again, Surface Transportation Block Grant. So I wanted to show you some of the recent projects. So we go to the next slide. This is what they're listing on their website right now, recent projects from their 2021 call for projects. So this just gives you a sense of the order of magnitude, the size of the project funding that they're awarding. So a lot of these are in the, like $1 million range. And these are mostly multimodal projects. These. So like multi-use trails, safety improvements, intersection, complete street project. Next slide, please. So it gives you a sense of where they're going with this. Next slide, please. And the last thing that I wanted to share with you is that $14 to $16 million a year set aside for their region. To me, my gut level reaction to that was, that's not really impressive. That's all that the Atlanta region is spending on livable communities. Because, honestly, we probably set aside 10 million a year for safety projects, complete street projects, just in Hillsborough County out of our federal share. So, is that really as impressive as we would like? What it looks like to me, looking at this list of funded TIP projects, is that they are helping some of the smaller communities with planning grants and getting them through to implementation. But then they are also funding some other multimodal projects and livable community projects that didn't necessarily go through that LCI grant process. So for example, when you run down this list of what did they fund through their most recent call for projects, you've got the Beltline Corridor, which is their big trail greenway system that goes around the entire region. Beltline Corridor, then you've got some transit asset management projects for the 12 County Express Service. And then they get into some other things, traffic signal enhancement. And then, as you go down some more multimodal improvements that are not flagged as LCI set aside projects. So they clearly have a prioritization system that is allowing a variety of multimodal projects to come forward and be funded with their federal grants. And I bet that if we get together and we focus on all of our multimodal performance measures, we can probably come up with something successful too.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. I just went on their website and I saw that last year underneath this arc, they established the Atlanta Regional Infrastructure Consortium, which is designed to best position Metro Atlanta to compete for discretionary grants through the Federal Infrastructure Investment Act. So they got their act together as a region to go after that massive amount of money that's coming out. And I can tell you Pasco hasn't applied for one thing. It's very sad. We are getting a grants writer, but good for them. They'll probably bring home millions and millions and millions of dollars for their region. So anyone else? Councilwoman?
So just looking at that, so this is a regional board. And of course, Atlanta is by far the largest city, and but many of these projects are actually benefiting some of the surrounding smaller cities, right? And so I just find it interesting that Atlanta is totally on board with this. And I'm really impressed by how a city like Atlanta would be taking that regional view and really be recognizing the power of the entire region and how it benefits people in Atlanta as well as the cities that are directly affected by those projects. So it's just really nice when you have a city as big as Atlanta that's not taking a territorial or parochial view, but really has that large, bigger picture in mind. I think this is something we should continue to explore and look to for inspiration as we move forward.
11 counties.
Yeah, and somehow they get it done and no one gets left behind. So
74
fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Anyone else? Are we going to end at 12 o'clock on time? 10 minutes. Yes, and I won't call you, I'll call you Councilman Citro.
Citro is fine.
Citro, Cipolo.
And
I can't see your name.
I have friends that live in Atlanta, and this is great, but Atlanta was leaps and bounds ahead of the Bay Area as far as transportation goes. Their modern system has been in place for almost 25 years now. More. Before even this was formed. We're starting from scratch on this.
Yeah, at least we're starting.
We're starting from scratch, and yes, we are starting. But this board 3 months ago, when Hart asked for help in their maintenance facility, voted no. So that was a local problem.
I wasn't here last time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep. Any other comments for today? Do I have anything more on my agenda that's buried? Old and new business? Our next meeting is Friday, June 23rd. And Hernando and Citrus is hosting. I think we have anyone here from Hernando today.
This is in the leadership. That'll be the full.
Oh, that's the leadership? Okay. And the Gulf Coast Safe Street Summits is November 2nd and 3rd in Pasco. I think is it here?
Here in Pasco County.
Okay, but not here in this building.
No.
Okay, I don't know whether they're holding it, but if there are no other comments, then we will be adjourned. So thank you very much for coming up to Pasco County.
Hey, Joe.
Somebody's calling.
I am.